When I saw the silver Honda racing down Maple Street at 75 miles in a 45 zone, I thought it was just another reckless driver who needed to learn about road safety. As a police officer with 12 years of experience in Riverside County, I'd pulled over thousands of speeders with every excuse imaginable. You won't believe what happened next. I never expected Sophie to break down crying and tell me she was racing to save her mother from her abusive stepfather, or that following her home would lead to the arrest that saved 2 lives. Sometimes what looks like a simple traffic violation is actually someone's desperate attempt to save the person they love most. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Life's Changing Stories. Now, let's dive into today's story. The screech of tires on asphalt cut through the evening silence like a knife, followed by the unmistakable roar of an engine pushed far beyond safe limits as a silver Honda Civic tore through the residential streets of Riverside County at nearly twice the legal speed limit. Officer Michael Torres had been monitoring radio traffic from his patrol car when the blur of motion caught his peripheral vision, triggering the kind of immediate adrenaline response that 12 years of police work had trained him to recognize as the beginning of something that would either end in tragedy or require swift intervention to prevent disaster from striking an unsuspecting community. Inside the speeding Honda, Sophie Hamilton gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, her vision blurred by tears that made navigating the familiar streets a dangerous gamble that could cost lives, including her own, but seemed like the only option available, when every second of delay could mean the difference between saving her mother and arriving too late to prevent the violence that had been escalating for months. The phone call that had sent her racing through the night still echoed in her ears, her mother's whispered, terrified voice saying, "He's drunk again, and he has the gun. Sophie, I think tonight might be the night he finally kills me." Michael's patrol car surged forward as he activated his emergency lights and siren, the familiar rush of adrenaline mixing with professional concern as he calculated the mathematics of pursuit, vehicle speed, traffic density, potential escape routes, and the dozens of variables that could transform a routine traffic stop into a high-speed chase through residential neighborhoods where innocent families were sitting down to dinner, children were playing in yards, and elderly residents were walking dogs along sidewalks that should have been safe from the kind of reckless driving that endangered everyone within a 3-block radius. What neither Sophie nor Michael could have predicted was that this moment of intersection between desperate family crisis and professional law enforcement duty would become the catalyst for a chain of events that would expose years of hidden domestic violence, save 2 women's lives, and create a bond of gratitude so profound that it would challenge everything Michael thought he understood about the rewards and recognition that came with choosing to serve others who desperately needed protection from the monsters hiding behind closed doors in neighborhoods that appeared peaceful and safe to everyone who didn't know the dark secrets some families carried. The quiet streets of Riverside County had been Officer Michael Torres' patrol area for over 12 years, providing him with intimate knowledge of the community rhythms, local families, and the kind of routine law enforcement challenges that characterized small-town policing in a region where serious crimes were relatively rare, but domestic disputes, traffic violations, and minor disturbances required constant attention from officers who understood that maintaining public safety often meant addressing problems before they escalated into major incidents. At 37, Michael had developed a reputation as a fair but thorough police officer who took genuine pride in protecting and serving residents who had come to view him as a trusted member of their community rather than an intimidating authority figure to be feared or avoided. Michael's approach to law enforcement had been shaped by his grandfather's stories about police work during an era when officers were expected to know every family in their jurisdiction and serve as both crime prevention specialists and community problem solvers who could address a wide range of social issues through patient listening, practical advice, and the kind of personal attention that built trust between law enforcement and the civilians they were sworn to protect. His grandfather had taught him that the most important police work often happened during routine interactions that gave officers opportunities to identify potential problems and provide assistance before situations developed into emergencies requiring more dramatic interventions. The evening patrol on Tuesday had been typically quiet until Michael spotted unusual activity on Maple Street, where traffic normally moved at residential speeds appropriate for a neighborhood filled with families, elderly residents, and children who played in yards and walked to school along sidewalks that were generally safe due to the community's collective commitment to careful driving and mutual respect for shared public spaces. A silver Honda Civic was traveling at what appeared to be dangerous speed through the residential area, creating obvious safety risks for pedestrians and other vehicles while violating posted speed limits that were designed to protect the community members who lived, worked, and raised families along streets that should provide safe environments for daily activities and neighborhood interaction. Michael activated his emergency lights and followed the speeding vehicle, noting that the driver immediately responded by pulling over rather than attempting to flee or ignore his presence, suggesting someone who understood the seriousness of their traffic violation but might have compelling reasons for driving at unsafe speeds through a residential neighborhood. Officer Michael Torres approached the silver Honda with the careful attention to safety and professional courtesy that characterized all his traffic stops. Running the license plate through his patrol car's computer system and discovering that the registered owner had no prior violations, arrests, or outstanding warrants that would suggest a pattern of reckless behavior or criminal activity. When Michael gently tapped on the driver's side window, a young woman in her late 20s rolled it down immediately, her face showing obvious stress and emotional distress that went far beyond the typical anxiety that most people experienced during routine traffic stops. "I'm so sorry, officer," Sophie Hamilton said immediately, her voice trembling with emotion that seemed disproportionate to the circumstances of a simple speeding violation. "I didn't realize I was going over the speed limit. I was distracted and not paying attention to my speedometer." Michael asked for Sophie's driver's license and vehicle registration, observing that her hands were shaking as she retrieved the documents from her purse while avoiding direct eye contact in a manner that suggested she was dealing with something more serious than embarrassment about being pulled over for speeding. "Ms. Hamilton," Michael said, reading her name from the license while maintaining the professional but approachable tone that had served him well during thousands of similar interactions. "Is there some kind of emergency that caused you to be driving 30 miles per hour over the posted limit?" Sophie's initial response was an unconvincing denial that everything was fine, but her body language and obvious emotional distress made it clear to Michael that she was struggling with something significant that had prompted her dangerous driving through a residential neighborhood where children and families should be able to feel safe from traffic hazards. Michael's training and experience had taught him to recognize when people were hiding important information, and Sophie's behavior suggested that she was dealing with a situation that might require police assistance beyond simply issuing a citation for a traffic violation. "I need you to be honest with me about what's going on," Michael said gently, using the patient, non-threatening approach that often encouraged people to share information about problems they were afraid to discuss with law enforcement. "You're obviously upset about something more serious than a speeding ticket." Sophie looked at Michael as if she were desperately seeking help, but was afraid to ask for it, her eyes filling with tears as she struggled with a decision that would determine whether she continued handling her crisis alone or accepted assistance from someone whose job was to protect people from exactly the kind of situation she was facing. Finally, Sophie's emotional control completely collapsed, and she began crying uncontrollably while trying to explain the circumstances that had caused her to drive recklessly through a neighborhood where her behavior could have endangered innocent people. "It's my mother," Sophie managed to say through her tears. "I'm trying to save her from my stepfather who's been hitting her since I was 12 years old. It's been 15 years of abuse, and tonight he threatened to kill her if she ever tried to leave him." Sophie explained that her mother had called her in panic, whispering that her stepfather was drinking heavily and becoming increasingly violent, but that she had made Sophie promise years ago never to involve the police because she was terrified that law enforcement intervention would make the situation worse and potentially provoke him to more serious violence. "I promised her I would never call the police," Sophie said desperately, "but I can't let him hurt her anymore. I was driving to get her out of there before he does something that can't be undone." Michael immediately understood that Sophie was dealing with a domestic violence emergency that required immediate police intervention regardless of her mother's reluctance to involve law enforcement, and that her speeding had been motivated by genuine fear for her mother's safety rather than simple disregard for traffic laws. "This situation absolutely requires police involvement," Michael told Sophie firmly but compassionately. "I cannot allow you to handle this alone, and your mother needs professional help to get away from someone who is threatening her life." Sophie agreed to allow Michael to accompany her, but she made him promise to arrest her stepfather and ensure that he couldn't retaliate against her mother for seeking help from law enforcement. "I'll do my job," Michael assured her, "but I need you to drive at safe speeds while I follow you with my emergency lights activated." Michael immediately radioed for backup while following Sophie through residential streets to her mother's house, located just 15 minutes away in a neighborhood where Michael had responded to several noise complaints over the years but had never received specific reports about domestic violence that would have justified more thorough investigation of the household. When they arrived at the modest two-story house, Sophie's mother, Janet Hamilton, opened the front door with a forced smile that couldn't hide the fresh bruises on her face, the red marks around her throat, or the obvious terror in her eyes as she tried to appear normal despite the clear evidence of recent physical violence. "Good evening, ma'am," Michael said professionally, showing his badge and identification. "Your daughter has reported that you're in immediate danger from domestic violence. I need to speak with you about your safety and what's been happening in this house." Janet initially denied that anything was wrong, claiming that Sophie must have misunderstood the situation and that her husband would never hurt her intentionally, repeating the kind of protective lies that domestic violence victims often tell to avoid escalating conflicts with their abusers. "Ma'am, I can see bruises on your face and neck," Michael pointed out gently, using his training in recognizing signs of abuse and communicating with victims who were afraid to seek help. "Those injuries are consistent with someone who has been physically assaulted." "I fell down the stairs and hit my face," Janet said unconvincingly, repeating an excuse that Michael had heard countless times from domestic violence victims who felt trapped between their fear of their abusers and their terror of what might happen if they sought help from authorities. Sophie stepped forward and took her mother's hands, speaking with the desperate urgency of someone who knew that this might be her only opportunity to save her mother's life. "Please, Mom, I'm begging you to stop protecting him and let Officer Torres help us," Sophie said, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to walk into this house someday and discover that it's too late to save you. This is not the way anyone should have to live." Janet finally broke down and confirmed that her husband had been abusing her for 15 years, though she attempted to minimize his actions by claiming that he was fundamentally a good person who simply had anger management problems that caused him to lose control during stressful situations. Michael immediately entered the house and found the living room in chaos, with overturned furniture, broken dishes, and other evidence of a violent struggle that had occurred shortly before Sophie's arrival. Janet's husband was standing in the kitchen, clearly having overheard the conversation, and Michael immediately placed him under arrest while reading him his rights. "You're under arrest for domestic violence," Michael announced, handcuffing the man while Janet and Sophie watched from the doorway. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Outside the house, Sophie hugged her mother tightly while both women cried with relief and gratitude that the nightmare they had been living with for 15 years was finally over. "Everything will be fine now, Mom," Sophie whispered. "You never have to live in fear again." 2 days later, Janet's husband was formally charged with multiple counts of domestic violence and sentenced to significant prison time that would keep him away from Janet and Sophie while they rebuilt their lives without the constant threat of violence and intimidation that had controlled their family dynamics for over a decade. For Michael, this case represented more than just successful law enforcement. It was personal validation that police work could make meaningful differences in people's lives by protecting the vulnerable and holding abusers accountable for their actions. He felt deep satisfaction knowing that his intervention had saved Janet from potentially fatal violence, while giving both women the freedom to build safer, healthier lives. Exactly 2 months later, Michael received an unexpected package at the police station that he initially assumed was from his wife or another family member who might be sending him something for his birthday or another special occasion. The attached note read, "Dear Officer Torres, you're proof that angels still exist, and I am truly grateful to the universe for sending you our way. Thanks to your timely intervention, I can finally live my life without constant fear of abuse. I had almost forgotten what it felt like to feel safe and free. Please accept this small gift as a token of my gratitude. It's yours to keep or do with as you wish. And special thanks for letting Sophie off the hook for speeding. I guess even angels understand the need for a heavy foot when you're running away from trouble." The gift was signed by Janet Hamilton and included fresh flowers, along with a small jewelry box that Michael opened to reveal an antique diamond necklace with hundreds of stones in different colors, sizes, and settings that clearly represented a rare and valuable family heirloom that had been carefully preserved across multiple generations. That evening, Michael took the necklace to a reputable jewelry appraiser for evaluation, and when he learned its estimated value, he nearly fainted from shock at Janet's extraordinary generosity and the significance of what she had chosen to give him as thanks for his police work. Michael immediately drove to Janet's house to return the necklace, feeling that it was too valuable for him to accept. But he made a shocking discovery. The house was empty, with a for sale sign in the front yard, and neighbors informed him that Janet had moved to another state to start fresh, where her ex-husband couldn't find her when he was eventually released from prison. When Michael finally tracked down Janet's new contact information and reached her by phone, she explained that while the necklace was indeed a valuable family heirloom passed down through generations, it no longer held positive sentimental value for her because it had become associated with the years of abuse and terror she had endured while trying to protect it and other family treasures from her husband's destructive rages. "While you might consider what you did just part of your job," Janet said, "your actions went far beyond normal duty because of the compassion and understanding you showed that made a real difference in our lives. I've learned that true value lies in the kindness and support people offer, not in material possessions that can't protect us from harm." Janet encouraged Michael to keep the necklace and use it however he wished, whether keeping it as a family heirloom, giving it to his own wife or daughter, or selling it to benefit his family, hoping it would serve as a reminder of the positive change he had brought into their lives through his empathy and professional dedication. A few weeks later, Michael sold the necklace and used the proceeds to establish a college fund for his children while donating a portion to local domestic violence prevention programs, ensuring that Janet's gift would continue creating positive impact for other families facing similar challenges. The money significantly improved Michael's family's financial security, but more importantly, it served as a powerful reminder that true compassion in law enforcement goes beyond mere duty, and that through acts of understanding and kindness, police officers can transform painful experiences into positive change that benefits entire communities and inspires others to choose courage over comfort when faced with opportunities to help people who desperately need protection and support. We hope you enjoyed today's story of love, life, and betrayal. For more free stories and entertainment from our channel, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe with notifications.